want to tell you a story. I was a pastor at St. Mark's United Methodist Church in Bloomington, Indiana, back in, it wasn't the last century, no. And I got a call from my dad, and he said, "Mom's in the hospital. Will you come?" Sure. So I hopped in my car in Bloomington, Indiana, and drove all the way to Bloomington, Illinois, where my mother was in the hospital. She'd had cancer several years before, and she'd been doing pretty well, but the cancer had returned. And this time it was in her brain, and my father was quite upset, as you might guess, and all he could do was hug me and hold on to me. You know that feeling, don't you? When there are no words, there's just touch. And so we went. I met him in the hospital, and we went up to Mom's room, and she was actually in quite fine humor. They had given her some medicine to deal with some of the issues she was having. And so we sat there for a while, and then the doctor came into the room, and now you're going to hear some of my prejudice, okay? I walked into the room, and I thought, this must not be the doctor because he's too young. And as he began to talk, I realized that this was the doctor I really did want to be treating my mother. And how did I know that? My mother began to talk to him, as she is wont to do. She will talk to almost anybody. And she looked at him and she said, "How is it you do what you do?" Because my mother had cared for her own mother, who had had several strokes. And my mother was just a young person. She was 16, 17, when she was caring for her own mother who was dying. And all her life, she had trouble being around sick people. Not unlike some of us, right? We have trouble. And so my mother asked the doctor, "How is it you do what you do?" And he looked at her, this fellow that I thought couldn't possibly be a doctor, with words wiser than I could have come up with. And he said to my mother, "I have learned to love my patients more than I hate the cancer inside of them." Isn't that someone you want to care for your loved one? I sat there in my chair. I was probably knitting because I needed something to do. And I just stopped. And I realized that that's the kind of comfort we need in situations where we feel powerless or lost. And then my mother said, "Well, I have another question for you." And this one made me giggle. She said, "So, will I have time to finish the quilt that's in the quilt frame?" And I thought to myself, well, she got him now. And he just looked at her, not skipping a beat, and he said, "Of course you will." So recently I've been doing a little research about this thing in Japan called kanchui. So this was a bowl that was broken, pieces all over. And this skill is to take gold and fill in the cracks. That's what that doctor did for me that day. He took gold I didn't know he had, and he filled in the cracks to make something whole for me. Isn't it beautiful? I don't know if you can see it well, but at the bottom, you can also see that it's not quite perfect, right? There's a little edge on the bottom that didn't quite get leveled out. I think this is what we want in our lives. We want some gold to fill in the cracks in our lives. We don't know where it's going to come from sometimes, but it shows up. We want some gold to come in and put the pieces back together and make this thing beautiful again. That's why we're here tonight. We're looking for a way to make our lives whole again. Jesus said it in the Sermon on the Mount, those who mourn will be comforted. And I suspect, although I don't know, that it takes a while to make this work. You got pieces that don't quite fit together anymore. Our lives just don't fit together the way they did before the tragedy, the loss. So, the doctor said to my mother, "Sure, you can finish the quilt." And sure enough, she did. And it was the pieces put together, some of them with her tears because she couldn't do it quite like she'd done it before. But it was this process of taking something broken and making it into a beautiful, beautiful thing. As you're thinking about what you brought to this place tonight, thinking about ways that could be pieced together with gold you haven't yet mined. It might come from all sorts of odd places. But imagine, just imagine what your life might look like if it were put together with the gold of Christ's love, the gold of your family's love, the gold of all those who love you. And can you imagine that one day it will look beautiful again? Amen.